All right. So the show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. And back today is my guest, playwright, author, political satirist, and proprietor of the Consent Factory, C.J. Hopkins. Manufacturing consent for private and public sector clients for over 250 years. We'll give his expat perspective on the recent election and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. I was that Chris. I didn't channel my inner Don Pardo completely.
It was pretty good. You got to just go a little deeper. Don's a little deeper.
Don. Yeah, I got to work on that.
Manufacturing consent for over 250 years. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Could you? I was wondering, like, why the 250? What does that demarcate for you?
Kind of the origins of modern capitalism, no?
Okay, 200. So that would place it, if we're, and you're going to make me do math, 1770.
You got to do the math because I'm a little under the weather and my brain's not doing math tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry to make you, but the show must go on. You were in theater, so you can appreciate that. So, we talked about this, like, what would today's show be about? And I think for me, what interests me is the way, at least you're in Germany. And so I guess you have that perspective of European continent, how they see what just happened over here, and which is still, in a sense, I guess, is still happening, is still going on, where the election is not quite over. In Georgia, for example, they're having runoffs for Senate seats. And though the president has agreed to leave peacefully, he did not concede the loss. But as an expat, what do the Europeans think of what happened over here?
Well, it depends on what Europeans you're talking about. I think German society is almost as divided as American society at this point. I think the vast majority of people are in tune with the official narrative that's being put out by the powers that be. It's thank God Hitler has been vanquished, and normality will be restored, and the good guys are back in office, and what a great relief it is. There's still a certain degree of fear mongering going on. At any moment Trump could call up his Russia loving white supremacist army to take over the government and start the Trumpian Reich. But mostly, people feel like, okay, it's over, and we vanquished Hitler, and now we can all get back to normal.
So I don't know if I'd really call it preparing for the show. Typically my wife puts on MSNBC every night to watch Rachel Maddow, and that hasn't been happening because she's been working on the bathroom. So I've been left to my own devices, and so I don't watch a lot of news, but I was catching a couple of things just to maybe be prepared for today. One of the things that I think the president had said is that the rest of the world was laughing at the fact that they felt that the election was, there had been fraud, and but most indicators show that most people don't believe there was fraud. So, again, in let's say in Germany, do they think that there was any fraud going on as part of this election?
Well, again, I think it pretty much mirrors, the society and the culture in the States. I think the majority of people, don't believe that, of course, because it's impossible for there to be fraud in an American election. In elections in so-called third world countries, in the global South and what have you, elections are rigged all the time, and there's a lot of fraud and vote manipulation and so on and so forth. But this never ever happens in the United States, and everybody knows this. There is this other, minority of people, just like there is in the States, that have the crazy idea that, hey, if the powers that be can manipulate all these elections in all these other countries, that maybe they can manipulate them in the United States too. But yeah, no, I would say the majority of people, absolutely have faith in the infallibility of American democracy.
Well, I mean, what's kind of fascinating is that, we're from, I'm from Miami. You're from Miami. We're from the South in a sense, though Miami is so far south. I like to say it's north again. I called it like the most southern borough at one point. But, in the South, historically, that voter oppression has existed. And I think what's been fascinating about this round or this particular election is that people got a taste of what it was like for people to try to repress their votes. All people, not just African Americans, Southern blacks, for example. I mean, was there any talk of that as we were leading up to it? I know that's before. We did speak the Monday before the election, but again, was there any talk about that this in this particular round, everybody got a taste of what voter suppression could look like?
No, not really. I mean, because I don't think the discussion has been about voter suppression so much. And as you were just saying, that voter suppression has been a standard feature of American elections for a long time. I mean, it was rampant during the Jim Crow South, and even afterwards. I mean, the Republicans are famous for their voter suppression tactics and what have you. But that wasn't really the discussion this time. I mean, people were, from what I can gather, people were talking about, the sudden vote dumps, that appeared where, suddenly all these votes came in for Biden and just pushed him up over the top in those key swing states. And I haven't been following all the details of that very closely. It just, to tell you the truth, Hugo, just because, I've been writing for 4 years. I've been, putting in my essays that, there's absolutely no way, that the global capitalist power establishment lets Trump serve a second term. It's just, it wasn't even a question to me. But there's, most of the noise that I've seen has been about, the manipulation of the voting machines, and those crazy vote jumps that came in, rather than vote suppression.
Well, I think that, one of the things they talked about when the votes jumped, it was part of it was that people were finally allowed to start calling in the mail-in votes, which most people were expecting to be heavily Democratic anyway, because the
Well, sure,
Democrats have been encouraged to vote by mail, whereas Republicans had not been as much.
sure, I mean, the entirety of the corporate media, which, let's just remember, I mean, just because 95% of the corporate media is owned by, six massive, corporate conglomerates. It doesn't mean that they're, putting out propaganda or not telling us the truth or anything. For months and months and months, the corporate media was putting the narrative out there and telling us exactly what was going to happen, and they were pretty much right on the money. They were saying, early in the night on election night, it'll look like Trump is winning, but then all these mail-in votes will come in, and it'll turn out that Biden had won. And that's more or less exactly what happened.
Right. Uh, I wanted to touch base on that article you had shared with me after the show. Who I forget the name of the writer for Rolling Stone again, who
Hey,
was
can I
compared.
interrupt you for one?
Yeah,
Can
go
I
ahead.
interrupt you with one
Sure.
thing? Because you mentioned the mail-in votes, and that's another thing. I mentioned that in a couple of my essays. It's another thing that
Oh, I missed. I should be doing the shameless plugging of here. I've got two volumes right here. This is volume one and volume two of the Consent Factory essays, which are available on your website. All right.
Yes. All
Sorry, I
right, pretty
interrupted.
much. Or they're available from pretty much any bookstore that you
Right.
go online. I recommend
Amazon.
Bookshop. Well, I recommend Bookshop.
Right.
Yeah. And there's another outfit called IndieBound. And these are really terrific outlets. They're websites that were set up as kind of an alternative to Amazon, where you can buy books from them, and they have a whole network of independent bookstores. And so when you're buying from Bookshop or IndieBound, you're actually supporting small independent bookstores.
As opposed
So
to Amazon, where you're
yeah,
supporting Jeff Bezos, who's one of the few people that's made a lot of money during the pandemic.
well, actually, the quite a lot of the super wealthy have just made billions and billions of dollars in profit. It's not just Bezos.
Right.
Yeah, most of the super elite billionaires have just made billions and billions in profit this year during the whole thing. The thing that I just wanted to mention was about the mail-in votes. Because this is another thing that crazy conspiracy theorists get all excited about. These mail-in votes, and they that mail-in votes are susceptible to fraud and what have you. And it's so nuts, Hugo, because of course, if you want to guarantee that your election has integrity, the thing that you want to do, and everybody knows this, is send out a bunch of ballots to people and have them mail them in. This is the way to guarantee election integrity. All right.
All right. Well, I mean, that's what they were saying, is that it's the case of absentee balloting, or whatever you want to, mail-in voting, has almost low to no levels of fraud in them at all. That they had the highest integrity as compared to other methods, whether it's the poll center, going to poll centers, and all these
Are,
other things.
are you sure you haven't been watching the Rachel Maddow?
Well, that's what that is. If I ever watch a news show, that's about it, because it's the only one. I mean, MSNBC is turned on all the time. I'm actually I've talked about this, that when you and I were maybe we talked about this last time, when you and I were coming up and we were studying broadcasting with Dave Gravel at Miami-Dade Community College, which is now Miami-Dade College. It was about Walter Cronkite was the standard objective reporting. That's not my experience when I watch most news today, except New York One. I missed New York One.
There you
Now
go.
that I'm in Connecticut, I don't get it. New York One, though I know New York One probably has its own ideas.
Because Hugo, I'll drop the sarcasm for a bit, and just seriously think about it. It's you can either have people showing up to the polls and voting there at a polling station, or you have hundreds and thousands of millions of mail-in votes that are coming in. I mean, just honestly think about which system is more susceptible to manipulation and fraud.
Yeah, well, maybe we should just get off the fraud, because that's not really the issue at hand. So I'm interested, again, from your perspective, not just as an American living abroad, but also somebody who devours the news. How do you see things progressing now with the Biden machine? Oh, by the way, I had pulled up the writer Matt Taibbi, who writes for Rolling Stone, one of many things, and it was interesting. They compared him to Hunter S. Thompson, which I did not find. I was not laughing at this article that you had shared with me, which basically talked about many things that you're talking about, which is how you talked about last time, how so many people conspired to undermine the Trump presidency. I mean, he did a pretty good job on his own, but with the way he handled the pandemic. But whether it was Comey, the FBI, or what other intelligence agencies, as well as the corporate media, never really gave him a chance to succeed, in a sense. I think I remember reading in one of your articles, you called it a soft coup with the impeachment. You called the impeachment a soft coup, right?
I might have, yeah. Yeah, it's the main reason that I don't dig into all of the arguments about, the voter fraud and the manipulation and what have you, is that, I have no idea whether it happened or it didn't happen, but it was completely unnecessary, from the moment that this guy won the Republican nomination, and really from the moment that he won the election, because nobody expected him to win the election in 2016. But from the moment that the guy won the election, the entire, establishment power apparatus, global cap is what I call them, but the entire power establishment apparatus began attacking the guy and crippling the guy and demonizing the guy. I mean, I think what my take is. It's in my essays and in my books. Is I don't believe that Donald Trump. I mean, we lived in New York City with the guy for years. He's a clown. He's the same clown. Clown that he was in New York City for all those years. And suddenly in 2016, because he won the election, now he's morphed into literal Hitler and a Russian intelligence asset. And it's ridiculous. What we watched was the entire power apparatus delegitimizing and demonizing and going after this guy, limiting what he could do during his presidency as much as possible, and making darn sure that he was only going to have one term, and that one term was going to be seen as this abominable aberration, this horrible, dangerous moment in American history that, thank God, we survived, and never want to see repeated again. It's basically what we've just been through.
That's about right. Well, I don't think anybody ever thought that he was, capable of anything. The concern was always the fact that.
Oh, I gotta stop you. I gotta stop you.
Because you know what I'm going to say. What am I going to say?
No, Hugo, I'm writing an essay right now, which mostly consists of just countless links to the stories that began in 2016 and continued throughout these last 4 years, of papers of record, the New York Times and the Washington Post and the BBC and the Guardian and the Atlantic and so on, over and over and over again, shrieking that this guy is literally Hitler and he's going to stage a coup, and that he's got this, white supremacist army that is liable to rise up and start the race war. And this is not even mentioning all of the Russiagate stuff. I mean, I can send you the articles. I can send you back to, I forgot what's his name wrote the article, that Trump has literally been a Russian intelligence asset since 1987. It was the article, yeah, in the New Yorker. So they have been the mainstream corporate media, and also, increasingly as the years went by, the further left alternative media has been shrieking about how this guy is literally a fascist, and is about to dissolve the Congress and institute some sort of fascist coup. So yeah, they did it.
Well, so obviously there's a faction that believes that, but you've got I think one of the things that we can admit that is that Republicans took advantage of having him in office and accomplished a lot of things that they typically would have been very unpopular to do in another administration. Anybody who was trying to get reelected, let's put it that way, and pushed a lot of things through as a result. I mean, I think that the Supreme Court justice is the least of it. I'm thinking about just like a lot of general policies, the tax cuts. I mean, we can't even talk about, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the national capital.
How much of that really is any different than what happens when another Republican administration is in office? I mean, I grant you the recognizing, Jerusalem as the capital of Israel was, bizarre. But for the most part, how much of the rest of it is really that different than what happens during any Republican administration?
I think that the gloves are off, and I think that they probably they their reach exceeded their grasp in a sense. And again, it goes back to because people are concerned. People who are in that office, people who sign the check, one of them they're concerned about being reelected, uh, like reasonably uh, concerned, and they also think of infamy, whatever you want to call it, posterity, their name. Uh, so they're going to soft pedal things, and they would not have maybe pushed as hard. I think that particularly with by controlling the Senate, Republicans took advantage to get things accomplished. Particularly, again, we talked about this last time. One of my biggest concerns about Trump is what's been going on with the climate, which I think that I mean, I don't know how you fall on that subject, but I think climate politics is a big deal, and to roll back, you know, some of the things that had been accomplished during the Obama administration, and certainly historically by presidents over the years, to just benefit businesses taking advantage of public lands. It's not a popular thing to do, and these people felt like they could get away with it because the behavior was so outrageous, and there's so many things that were going on at the same time. They were eating up airtime, uh, you know holding up shiny toys while taking
This
advantage in different
But this was
places.
kind of my question to you when you're describing the the deregulation and the let's just give everybody license to frack everything to death. How different is this really from let's say the Bush administrations or the Reagan administration? Don't the Republicans pretty much always come in and try to cut back the regulations that the Democrats have put in place? And I mean, just how radically different is it really?
I guess it was just the tenor of it. Maybe I just feel that things were done that would not have probably been done if everybody was playing by the same rules. I know,
I
and
know.
I know you see this as all, everybody's part of one of the things about Trump is that he got in there and surprised everybody, and that's what upset everyone. But
Well, maybe let me give you another example, because I just want to press you on this because I hear this a lot from folks that watch Rachel Maddow. And I ask, and I ask for the specifics. What are the specific horrible things that are so radically different that Trump did during his?
he opened up virgin forest in Alaska. I mean, they're drilling in Anwar, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I mean, I know they have wanted to, and they had just never been able to do it.
Yeah, and what I'm saying, Hugo, is if you go back and look at what previous Republican administrations did, and compare what you just cited to what they did, I think you will find that it's really not that radically different. The other example that I wanted to bring up was you remember the concentration camps. They were literal concentration camps on the border where Trump was.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And you remember when there was a little snafu in the media, and they ran these pictures. The media ran these pictures of these kids in these cages.
That turned out to be from the Obama administration.
And it's kind of, this is what I'm talking about.
That's just bad reporting. But look, we've got these 500 kids who we can't find their families, and that was some guy's idea in the Situation Room at the White House, who said, "Hey, let's do this. This will stop them," and they did it. And I think that's what goes back. Is when you've got somebody in charge who doesn't think things through, this is what happens.
Hugo, to just take a guess, who has deported more?
Obama.
By far. What I'm getting at, Hugo, is it's not just bad reporting. Yeah, if what I've been covering, what's in my books that you just held up,
Right.
what I've mostly been covering for the last 4 years from the time Trump got elected, what I've been covering is the propaganda machine, you know,
For the left.
that exists. It's not the left.
It's
People say left.
capitalism, right?
It's let me go back to what I said in during our first
But quick, 2 minutes before I go for station break.
all right, then
You
I'll
may do
give
a
you the I'll give
yeah,
you the
go ahead.
short version before the station break,
Go
right?
ahead.
We live in a global capitalist world. We've been living in this global capitalist world since the Soviet Union dissolved. Global capitalism has no outside adversaries, all right? What we're talking about, it's not left, it's not right, it's global capitalism exercising and maintaining its power. How are we doing with the station break?
I can do it right now. You're watching LaGuardia Radio WLGR. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and my guest today is playwright, author, political satirist, and proprietor of the Consent Factory, C.J. Hopkins. Manufacturing consent for private and public sector clients for over 250 years. And we're
Better.
talking about the expat perspective on the recent election. And we haven't even touched on, we wanted to give you a chance to upset a lot of people by talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. But go right ahead and finish your global capitalism spiel.
Yeah. It's just the left right thing kind of drives me crazy. To tell you the truth, there's a lot of people over on the right, that are screaming at the powers that be, and it's like it's the Marxists, it's the communists, George Soros and the communists,
My
trying to
sister,
do.
who says that New York has been taken over by the commies.
Yeah, which is crazy, and and then people on the left are screaming what they scream, and the book, The War on Populism, what that book, the reason it's called The War on Populism is that's what's been going on, during the Obama administration. Everything was hunky dory. Obama, was bombing 8 countries, dropping God knows how many bombs a day, and killing American citizens abroad and locking kids up in cages, and and that was all fine, because he was very articulate and not just a buffoon like Trump. And what happened in 2016 is, first Brexit happened, and then Donald Trump happened, and then there was this populist, kind of uprising all around the world, and global capitalism, which is the power that be. Global capitalism said, "Whoa, we need to get a handle on this, and we need to quash this populist backlash against the spread of global capitalism." And getting rid of Trump, demonizing Trump and getting rid of Trump is part of that, and was part of that. That's the reason that it was done. It's not about left and right. It's about getting back to a global capitalist world, where everything is quote unquote normal.
Okay, well, so we're on the other side of the election, and there is some sort of transition going on. You want to talk about what you foresee moving forward? And I mean, we can also mention your website, which I went on your website to check what you were writing about lately, and I noticed you're actually writing about Germany and what you call, I guess, the old Germans or the new Germans, but I guess it's an uptick in I don't want to more than a conservatism. Is it National Socialism again?
No, not at all. I mean, that's National Socialism is Nazism, yeah, and
Right,
that was a thing that was specific. And in the piece, I wrote specifically, I'm not calling anybody Nazis. Yeah,
right.
I'm calling them totalitarians, and that's exactly what we're witnessing. Throughout this year, from the beginning of the so-called, apocalyptic plague that we're all supposed to be experiencing. What we've been watching is a global rollout of pathologized totalitarianism. The piece that I just wrote about, was centered on events that are happening here in Germany, where the Reichstag, the parliament, just got together and passed a law. I played with it in my column. That, oh no, it's not similar in any way to the law that the Weimar government passed in 1933 that gave Hitler and the Nazis dictatorial powers. But of course it is. They just passed a law that gave the government power to ignore the German Constitution and enter people's houses, raid their restaurants, and rule basically by decree. Yeah,
and this is to stave off the pandemic.
oh yes, that's right. Because there's this deadly pandemic, which 99.7% of those infected survive. But because of that, what we need to do is abrogate the Constitution. We need to outlaw all political protest, and we need to grant the government dictatorial power to basically rule by decree. And this has been happening since the beginning of the so-called pandemic, Hugo, and I've been documenting it since the very beginning. During the first wave, it happened in Spain, it happened in France, it happened in Italy, and it started happening in the UK. It is now, this is running rampant in the UK. There was just a big protest, a big freedom protest, in London, and the cops were, cut loose to just beat the crap out of the protesters. I could go on and on and on. I've been writing about it the entire year. What we're watching is the rollout, of the most intense propaganda campaign that I've ever witnessed in my lifetime, and it is being accompanied by increasingly totalitarian measures on the part of governments throughout the West.
Well, it's being, I can't speak to what's happening in Germany, but I can speak to the genuine fear here in the United States. 48 states are red zoned. The death, I know you're saying that this.
What does red zone? What does red zone mean?
Red zone means that the government is within its rights to pass restrictions on behavior, particularly curfews for people to be out at night in bars. 100% capacity of restaurants has to be pushed back. It varies from state to state. We've got states that aren't following any of these regulations, aren't making people wear masks, which has been recommended by the CDC. But they're saying that, and part of it, probably one of the things that triggers it is the number of folks in hospitals, where most of the hospitals at, the critical care wards are at 100% capacity. I know
except that they're not.
They're not at 100%. So what do you tell me? That the hospitals are just making that up?
Pull the stats out and look at it, Hugo. This was the same propaganda that we were hit with last spring, right? And when the numbers were actually brought out, none of the, yes, New York took it bad, but most of the hospitals all over the world were not at capacity, were not overloaded.
Well, no, I'm talking about in the places where and now it is across the country. And, and I guess one of the great fears is the fact of just utter exhaustion on the part of the healthcare industry. I know you're saying that this thing is, not as bad as possibly the flu of '68 or whatever, but we lost 250,000 people just here in the United States. That's 5 Vietnams. All right, 5 times the number of people that died, servicemen, should I say, in the United States in the Vietnam conflict.
Do you know how many people die? Do you know how many people die every day, every week, every month on a regular basis?
But in hospitals?
In hospitals.
One particular disease. Well, like I said before, so let's talk about this. East Elmhurst Hospital, ground zero for the what happened in New York. they had no capacity in their morgue or the funeral homes, and they have refrigerated trucks in order to keep the bodies. All right.
Right.
So what are you telling me? That's typical.
Yeah, I actually referred to that in one of my pieces. Hugo, I remember when all the pictures of the death trucks were rolled out, and also the pictures of the emergency field hospitals, which were never used, and also the emergency hospitals that were set up in the UK that were never used. But back to the death trucks. It's like all suddenly every newspaper was running the pictures of the death trucks. And I was like, oh my God, it's terrible, the death trucks. And so I looked into it a little bit, and I found some other articles where they actually interviewed people that worked at the mortuaries and what have you. And the people were explaining, well, yeah, we haven't been able to we haven't been able to do what we normally do. What normally happens when somebody dies is that the family then calls the mortuary, and then the mortuary makes arrangements, and they come and they pick up the body of the deceased person from the hospital, and they take them out of the hospital morgue and they bring them to the mortuary. All of this, the whole death truck thing was happening during the lockdown and the chaos and the confusion, and the mortuaries were unable to operate as they normally do. So, of course, hospital morgues are not set up to store massive amounts of bodies. The hospital morgues are set up to store them for a short period of time and then have the mortuaries come and pick them up. So if the mortuaries can't pick up the bodies and the morgues are, not set up for massive numbers, of course they have to store them somewhere. And that's why they brought the trucks in. And then the trucks are portrayed to us as, the hospitals are overflowing with dead people that they have to put them in trucks. When the reality is just a little bit more mundane than that, and makes a little bit more sense.
Well, like I said, LaGuardia has a nursing program and an EMS program. We have alumni in the field. Faculty have been getting the stories, and they sound overwhelmed. So, I mean, what do we say to that? That they're really not working as hard as they think they are?
Well, what I say to that is, stories, anecdotes, assertions, people's personal experiences, all of this stuff is valid. It is what it is. But if you're talking about imposing, quasi-totalitarian measures on societies all across the globe, that probably shouldn't be based on the experiences of a particularly hard-hit hospital in Queens. It should probably be based on actual statistics, and I've been trying to cite, actual statistics from the science that everyone, really screams at me to pay attention to, like the CDC and the WHO, who have all basically admitted that the infection fatality rate of this thing is, I forget what it is. It's a little bit more than the common seasonal flu, right? And when you dig into, do you remember the hysteria in Italy, where Italy was totally overrun and everybody was dying and the hospitals were full and they had the death trucks there as well, and what have you? And when you go back and look at the numbers, right? The average age of, I think I've got them here. Hang on one second. Yeah. The median age of COVID deaths is over 80 years in most countries, and only about 5% of the deceased had no serious preconditions. What you're talking about is, very old people at the end of their lives who are getting a severe respiratory virus, and some of them are dying from it. Right? And I'm not saying that there isn't a virus, and I'm not saying it isn't horrible when anyone loses their loved one. But what I'm saying is, when you look at the actual facts, not somebody screaming about, oh, I have mask marks because we're overloaded in the hospital. But when you actually look at the data, I've been challenging someone to show me data not assertions, not exaggerations, not speculations, but data that justifies the totalitarian measures that have been implemented. I've been challenging someone to show me this since March, and no one has been able to.
So do you see, because I've been trying to talk about what you think is going to happen here politically moving forward with the Biden administration. Uh, I know that Biden has stated, that he would not be locking down the country, which the Trump followers were accusing him of probably doing. But do you see that happening here in the United States?
I don't know. Do you believe that, Hugo?
Do I believe what?
But because
That he
Biden says that, it's not
that
going to
he
happen.
won't lie. No, I know that. Look, I forget what the phrase is about a politician when a politician says, I forget which way it goes. When he says no, I mean he means maybe. When he says maybe, he means yes. And when he says yes, he's not a politician, right? So I know that politicians have to, democracy is the politics of the half loaf, right? You don't always win. You have to make concessions, and we have to compromise. But for now, I have to take him at his word. And again, it comes down to, and I can see where you're going with this, is that I would say, well, if it's necessary, I mean, I know in Germany, right? You guys weren't you locked down for 4 weeks? Are you still in the middle of
We're
that? That you
we're
were
locked
locked
down
down?
now.
Right.
We're locked down now, and they just passed a law, abrogating the Constitution, so that the German government, I mean, German cops are raiding people's houses. Yeah.
And looking for what?
Yeah, looking for people who are, not social distancing, or, or who are, spreading misinformation. There are cops on the main, on the big shopping street, on the Kurfürstendamm. Cops are patrolling, and detaining people who are not wearing masks. The people went out to have a political protest, which in a democracy, one of the fundamental, rights that people have is the right to petition their government. That's illegal now. Yeah, that's been banned, and people went out and wanted to protest the abrogation of the Constitution. They were holding the German Constitution, and so the cops beat up about 100 of them, and then they hosed everybody else down with water cannons. Okay.
All right.
Meanwhile, the media, is smoothing, their path, because the media for months has been telling, everybody on a daily basis that anyone who, questions any of this narrative, any of this, pandemic narrative, anyone who actually wants to see facts, or anyone who wants to actually disseminate facts on the internet, is a, far-right, fascistic, extremist, AfD conspiracy theorist, maniac.
You mean you?
Me. We're all. I'm joking.
But they haven't busted in. They haven't busted into your office. I mean, to your home. By the way, we are in the last quarter hour, so if people have questions, Dr. Riccio, feel free to forward them.
I'm joking about it, Hugo, but I'm serious. For example, one German politician, after the big protest on the 29th of August here in Berlin, after that protest, one German politician actually wrote, these people, meaning us, and we're called Corona deniers. Right? Imagine how that sounds in Germany, to be an anything denier.
How would you say it in German?
A COVID denier, Leugner. Yeah, Corona Leugner. Yeah, but of course, what they're trying to evoke is Holocaust deniers, right?
I see.
We're called Corona deniers, and one local German politician actually called for us to be deported. because we're dangerous. Anybody questioning the government is now dangerous. An ex judge here in Berlin recently, I saw this on Twitter. She's tweeting, people who criticize the government's corona policies or ask these questions, they should not be allowed to work. They should lose their jobs, and they should be sent to camps. Actually used the word camp in German. Yeah. This is the mentality that all of this propaganda is fostering.
So you've got it worse than we do here, is what you're saying.
I kind of doubt it, Hugo, because I see the same kind of fanaticism in the States, and most of my old American friends have either unfollowed me or blocked me or just ignoring me. I had a few fights.
So you're like our other friend, who we had a conversation with the other time, our old friend Benny Grafton, who's been unfriended on Facebook because of his pronouncements.
Oh yeah. We've been demonized from the outset. People who are simply. I did an interview for Naked Capitalism, right? And the guy it's a review of my book, War on Populism, which isn't about COVID, obviously. And so I did an interview, and it ran on Naked Capitalism. I don't know if you know that site, popular New York site, liberal site. The hundreds of commenters poured in, not to engage with the interview, not to talk about the book, but to denounce me as a dangerous COVID denier. It's mob mentality, Hugo, and it's totalitarianism. That is what has been whipped up here.
All right. And I can only expect it would happen here on a college radio station where I've forewarned folks to wear their critical thinking hats. It can only be one of two minds. Either it does hold up that we have free speech, or nobody's listening. One or the other. So we're in the last quarter hour. We're about 11 minutes, but 3 of those are going to be a little more music. So you got about 8 minutes. What would you like to say moving forward as far as either things you're working on, and you've talked a little bit about some of the things you're working on, but what the future holds?
I'm working on the same thing, Hugo. It's the only way that I can understand this. It doesn't all of this insanity that has been rolled out this year. It doesn't make any sense in relation to the actual virus. And yes, people, I believe there's an actual virus. None of these totalitarian measures make any sense in relation to the actual virus and the threat that the actual virus poses. So I have no choice but to speculate on why this is happening. And the only way that I can see it is a continuation of this war on populism. There are some sources that people can look at. The World Economic Forum, has generated a lot of papers describing exactly the scenario that we're in and exactly the major shifts, global shifts that need to take place in the world. And what they're talking about is more centralized global government and less national sovereignty. Yeah. Anyway, I encourage people to take a look at that. Just Google the Great Reset is what most of the power players are talking about. Yeah.
And that would be just like kind of like a world NAFTA.
Well, it's the big boys at the WEF and are kind of looking at the future and deciding we need to have a radically different world where, first of all, things are a lot more automated and people are a lot more controlled. Yeah. I mean, here we are, it's November, all of this started in March. And, people are now just casually saying, oh, yeah, sure, we're going to have a vaccine and have some kind of digital certification that we've been vaccinated in order to take a trip on our holiday.
I need to have digital certification to get into one of the buildings at the college.
Yeah, and this has just been rolled out over the course of months, and it's increasingly becoming normal. We're gradually transitioning to a much more digitized, a much less free, and a much more totalitarian world where we don't really need as much social contact, and things like the theater. We don't need to go to the theater. We can do it on Zoom. Yeah, we don't need to actually have in-person meetings. Everybody can just have Zoom meetings. And in the most intimate areas of our lives are being increasingly regulated and controlled, in the name of protecting us from a virus that, over that, like 95% of the people who have it either experience no symptoms at all, right? Or experience mild flu-like symptoms, and a very, very small percentage of the people who have it get seriously sick, and an even smaller percentage of those people die, right? It's just not, a world-shattering apocalyptic virus, but that's being used as a pretext to introduce all of these increasingly totalitarian measures, and people are just gobbling it up. It's like, yeah, give me a mask. Yeah. Make me stay home. Yeah. Social distance my kids. And it scares me to death, Hugo. I don't know what to tell you.
You got 3 minutes. What would you do different then?
I would do what we've probably always done when we have a pandemic, when there's a new virus going around, is that you protect people as much as you possibly can without shutting down the entire society and abrogating constitutions and sending out goon squads to raid people's homes and beat anyone who tries to ask questions. Does it mean that people are going to die? Yeah, people die. This happens. There are pandemics. People died in 1968 and 1969. The world didn't stop.
All right. Well, so another show, and I don't, I'm trying to think of it, because a lot of things we touched on today, I think we touched on last time, but I think we've moved a little bit farther on because we didn't talk at all about COVID. I'd love to have you back after the inauguration, if we can get through that, and by that point we would have had another at least a couple of months to see if some of the things you're talking about take place in this country. Are you willing to come back and talk
Yeah,
again?
sure.
All right.
If I'm not in a camp, yeah,
Right.
then
You haven't been,
then
yeah, or
yeah.
deported. Where are you going to go? What would you do if you had to leave Germany? Would you come back to
Uh,
the States?
I don't know. Well, I think they would probably deport us somewhere to the east, Hugo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Lebensraum, whatever it's right.
No, most of the camps, the camps tend to get set up in Poland and stuff, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. Well, I was just thinking maybe that they'd let you get out. I'm sure England would take you for
But I
now.
would look.
You got a
Let me
minute, by
just
the
say,
way.
yeah.
You got a minute.
Let me just say to your audience, anyone who is full bore, with the COVID narrative, I would just encourage you, just for fun, just for an exercise, go back and read some of my essays that have been written over the course of the year. Look at the links, and try to open your mind to, questions. I'm not denying that there's a virus. I'm saying that what's happening to society is all out of proportion to what the virus is. And I just challenge people to open their minds a little bit and take a look.
All right. So with that, I'll just say thanks to our guest today, C.J. Hopkins, playwright, author, political satirist, and proprietor of the Consent Factory, manufacturing consent for private and public sector clients for over 250 years, who's been talking to us today about his expat perspective on the recent election and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Chris, thank you for being on the show again, for your insights, for challenging me. Uh, and I want to thank our guests, those who did listen, who did watch. And I want to thank Dr. Riccio manning the Twitch stream, and Christopher Pope, our engineer, who has been sitting quietly listening to this. So, and we'll go out the way we came in. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye.